supposed to be the capitalist son, not the socialist one.
You're so true. That's true. Yeah, but this is a color which I've kind of today worn it because I'm at home only. आप कैसे हैं? How is your health?
Thank you. Actually, I reached night around 11. With help of Giri, we are maintaining this weekly conversation of Gandhian School of Democracy and Socialism Forum. Last week, you remember, it was Rajmohan Gandhi ji.
I know.
And today we have a sociologist, Professor Ajit Pandey, a Genuite who was a professor and head at BHU.
Wonderful.
And the discussant is coming all the way from Italy.
Wow.
Professor Giri Gloigi. And you are there. So it will be serious dialogue. Because he is going to talk about something which is like an open secret about our society.
Yeah.
Like any multi-religious society, we are also part-time secular.
Yes. When are you coming to Delhi, and when can we have that meeting? And आप हमारे साथ रहेंगे या नहीं रहेंगे? हमारा मार्गदर्शन.
Actually, I'll be with you on 26th, 27th, because there is something at Vishnu King.
Acha.
28th and 29th. So I'll be there with you on, as it suits you, either 26th or 27th, as it suits you.
आप बताइए उसी टाइम में करते हैं आपको. Will you stay with me or will you staying centrally? आपको central पसंद है?
No, actually staying they have arranged, so why do we bother your home and your helpers? And they'll arrange it in Vishnu King at Chanakipuri.
Yeah. But you wherever.
So, and
this is your home.
We can meet.
You want, I'll let you choose whatever you want to do. But this is your home.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You want to come, you're just welcome most time.
Sure, that will be great. That will be great. So what we will do is that we'll see how it suits you on 26th, because daytime you are comfortable in driving. So we can meet at a place of mutual convenience. We can meet at Teen Murti Library. We can meet at Vishnu King.
So 26.
We can have lunch together. We can have lunch together.
Bina's, doctor consultations are going on. So about that, L4, L5 has collapsed.
Oh, I see.
So this spinal surgery is very tricky, it can paralyze if it doesn't go well.
Oh God.
She's hesitant to do it. And physiotherapy, ek ke baad ek ho raha hai uska. She's so fed up of life now.
No, that has to be the top priority. Top priority. So we have to avoid the timing of our therapy and choose your time. We can have lunch together. We can have a cup of tea together as it suits you and Beena ji.
Ji, definitely. No, we'll definitely do this on 26 or 27.
Okay. And there is a new ordinance. You know about this new ordinance?
I'll even tell Sharma ji, Shekhar ji to organize one meeting in Delhi.
That will be fine, sir. That will be fine.
Wonderful.
But there is a new ordinance by President of India.
What?
Oh, you did not notice it?
No.
It was issued last night that by the powers vested in the President of India by Constitution, Shri Vijay Rao is not allowed. Feature. And it is not so pronounced in European countries, which is the mother, which is the home of the idea of nation building, nationalism in the modern times, because most of the European countries have already gone through religious conflicts, particularly between Christianity and Islam. And now they are going through intra-religious conflicts, Protestant and Catholic, or Orthodox Church of Russia, or Church of England. So it's an intra-Christian conflict, not Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Sikhs as it is in India. But most of the societies in the world, known to sociologists and anthropologists, do show elements of communalism. So if India is a multi-religious society, 1,300,000,000 people, with all the major religions of the world represented in substantially concentrated population, are we really looking at the wrong indicators? Are we looking at failure of secularization? Or we are looking at assertion of communalism? Given the reality of partition of India in 1940s, the arguments of Professor Ajit Pandey are much awaited arguments, because that changes the pathology of power. We think that communalism is a byproduct of vote bank politics. But if we go by the diagnosis of Professor Ajit Pandey, vote bank politics or colonial strategy of divide and rule are all taking advantage of certain pre-existing traits, trends, tendencies, orientations. Without taking much of your time, I am as anxious as you are to listen to this sociologist who comes from the heartland, so-called heartland of Hindu politics, Varanasi, which has the rare privilege of selecting a man twice who is leading the country as Prime Minister of the Republic of India. So, joining Randhir Gautam and the other faculty members of Gandhi School of Democracy and Socialism, particularly Dr. Veronica and Dr. Alok Vajpayee, I welcome and request Professor Ajit Pandey to take his next 40 to 50 minutes to present the idea behind his title, Communal Society, Secular State. It will be followed by around 20 minutes of commentary by this scholar from Italy, because the present day problems are associated originally with the Italian version of fascism, which was not based on religion, but it had some kind of ethnic ideology, and that got further reflected in Germany, where it did become communal as an anti-Jewish national project. So in India, when we discuss communalism, at the base of it, we suggest that it is being inspired by Italian fascism and German Nazism. So we have a very suitable scholar to reflect about Professor Ajit Pandey's presentation, as well as the overall indications of the Indian situation. And then it will be followed by some of your questions that will enrich Professor Ajit Pandey's own understanding, and that will give him another chance to clarify a few points which may be missed in his main presentation. So let us join, all of us, and request Professor Ajit Pandey to make his presentation. Ajit ji, please.
Thank you very
One
much.
more point, friends.
Yes.
Today he will be heard very clearly because his audio system is working, but he's blaming his 2 years old grandson that he has messed up his video system. I'm requesting Ajit Pandey to be careful with the younger generation, because whatever are our problems have to be solved by these children and grandchildren. So don't fight with your grandson, and we'll be happy by listening to you without seeing you. Professor Ajit Pandey.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Before I start, I must express my thanks to you, sir, as the chairperson. You could manage to spare some of the time to edit my lectures, is what I understand, and enlighten me for improving the kind of framework that I have proposed. I'm proposing to communicate to all of you. I'm also thankful to Mr. Randhir Gautam, and thankful to the entire Gandhi School of Democracy and Socialism. Randhir ji ne humse almost 2 or 3 days before asked for the topic, Communal Society and Secular State in India. I have I thought and gave this title to him, understanding that some other speaker will speak on this topic. Had I known that I will be invited for that, I would have not accepted. Because, am I audible to you? Hello? Am I audible to you?
You are audible,
Yes.
and Randir had found your photograph also,
Achha,
which,
thank you, thank you.
which is a good alternative.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. But since Professor Anand Kumar is there, I love to speak my such an idea that I have on the topic that has been given to me to speak on. I'll start from nationalism and political culture of democracy. These two are forms of normative innovations, which are essentially modern in ethos and have a pan-Indian character. Before I come to the communal society and secular state in India, I must speak on these two concepts, nationalism and political culture of democracy. Both of these phenomena are of exogenous nature and pose serious challenges to the primordial normative structure of Indian tradition. So both nationalism and democracy in India, to me, have come into being in a different historical context. For historical regions, these institutional innovations have been introjected in the Indian body politic in a compressed form. And this phenomenon created new and far greater cultural stress than it did in the western part of the world. This would be evident if we review the process of growth in nationalism and democracy in India. And while discussing nationalism and democracy, certainly we'll try to posit communalism and secularism. So some of the issues related to communalism and secularism. Historically, Indian nationalism has been a forerunner of democratic polity. And substantively, it was never modeled completely after the Western pattern. From Ram Mohan Roy to Gandhi, the nationalistic consciousness was oriented towards the Indian tradition. In this matter, there were differences of degrees, but not of kind. The national leaders were for modernity, but not at the cost of traditional cultural identity. I must refer to two great people of India, Tilak and Gandhi. They represent extreme forms of this movement, being the advocates of a kind of nationalism which was deeply embedded in the past Hindu tradition. Gandhi had an uncanny skill to project to Indian masses the many humanistic values of the modern West through traditional cultural symbolism. The kind of nationalism of which he was an advocate was rooted in the Indian tradition, but at the same time was non-communal and to the extent secular. And secularism for Gandhi did not mean all religiosity, but the spirit of religious tolerance, which he postulated on the basis of universalistic ethnic ethic of Hinduism itself. His conception of Indian polity was entirely non-communal and yet not secular in the strictly Western sense of the term. So under this backdrop, I'll extend my ideas of this communalism and nationalism. The concepts of communalism and secularism provide useful conceptual tools for the analysis of the role of Indian nationalism in the cultural modernization of our country. Secularism is a sub-process of modernization and change. Its spread implies that various issues and events in personal and social life are evaluated not from religious point of view, but utilitarian, with an increase in the process of secularization. The various spheres of social life, which formerly were guided by religiously ordained norms, are exempted from its hold and are increasingly governed by norms which tend to be rational. Increasingly, nationalism contributed to rapid politicization in our country. This movement was primarily led by Indian National Congress, which right from its beginning took a non-communal standpoint. And 1 year after its founding in perhaps in 1885, its report stated that the Congress is a community of temporal interests and not of spiritual convictions that qualify men to represent each other in the discussion of political questions. Commitment to this ideal was kept intact by the Congress despite many difficulties such as heterogeneous nature of different leaders or its leadership, which from time to time consisted or even jealous communal nationalists, and the system of communal representation introduced by the Government of India Act 1919. And the historical suspicion or ambivalence in Muslim-Hindu relationship in India. So these factors taken together led ultimately to a partial, if not the total trump of communalism, that is the partition of the country in 1948. So in free India, independent India, however, secularism has survived despite its many difficulties. The Indian National Congress, which came into power as a political party, consistently advocated the need for India becoming a secular state. The independent India adopted a constitution which guarantees individual and collective freedom of religion. This is all written in Fundamental Rights, Article 25 to 28, and lays down that there should be no state discrimination on the ground of religion in public employment and education. It further provides that the state as such must be neutral to religious goals and should not levy taxes for religious purposes or encourage religious teachings in education institutions wholly financed by the state. It, however, does provide for special seats in the legislative assemblies and House of the People, Lok Sabha, for the members of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes on purely humanitarian considerations. Thus, in this way, Constitution of India offers us a normative structure of secularism and democracy, which form essential parts of Indian tradition. However, the enactment of secular ideals in the Constitution does not imply an actual conformity to its norms in public life and relationships between major Indian communities, particularly the two communities, Hindus and Muslims. Its proper evaluation is necessary. If you go for evaluation, it may be from this we may point out that the Hindu community right from the beginning of the British rule, and they are on the record took a more liberal attitude towards various social legislations, which abolished many of its pseudo-religious customs by law. It even tolerated legislations affecting the caste system quite early in the 19th century. And after independence, many legislations regarding reforms in customs of marriage, untouchability, inheritance, etc., have been accepted without much opposition. This may be partly explained by the universalistic nature of Hindu religion itself, but it is mainly due to the emergence of an enlightened elite in the Hindu society with a rational commitment to nationalism. In the case of other major community, the Muslims has been fundamentally different. And this creates disbalances in the process of secularization in nature. There are a lot of cases in points, Sabano cases, and there are a lot of recent cases. I don't like to go for the discussions of those cases today. There are other inconsistencies in the growth of secularism in our country. Despite claims made for the religious neutrality, and the state in our country has often intervened in the religious matters, intervening in the religious matters. This particularly holds in case of management of temples and religious institutions, such as monasteries and monastic heads. Enactment in this sphere, of course, existed right from the British times. For instance, in Bengal in 1810 and in Madras in 1817, regulations were passed for regular administration of temple endowments by the government. These were subsequently revised until in 1960. The government of India appointed a Hindu Religious Endowment Commission to examine the administration of Hindu religious endowments and suggest steps to improve their management. So following the Commission's report in 1962, legislations have been enacted in many states of our country, which previously did not have such legislation, such as in Assam, Uttar Pradesh, and Punjab.
सर थोड़ा हिंदी में बता सकते हैं?
For the management of, हाँ बता सकते हैं, क्यों नहीं बता सकते? जो बता सकते हैं.
ठीक है सर.
Have been enacted in many states of India. Management of temple endowment and steps have also been initiated or taken to rationalize the methods of learning and training of Hindu priests through theological colleges and encouragement of Sanskrit teachings. So in the political sphere also, many political parties and groups, not to name any of them, have continued to voice communal point of view on contemporary issues. There are political parties in our country which directly or indirectly have communal orientations. Of late, we have a lot of encounters, are active in the political arena, and some of them have even increased their political influence in many parts of the country. Hindu sadhus and religious leaders conducted violent movements against the killing of cows, and many states parochial movements based on caste, regionalism, and linguistic affinities was degrees of different kinds of, particular kinds of identities in political processes. And since secularism implies a universalistic worldview, these contemporary movements in India do not harmonize with the value system of ours, or the value system that is embodied in the Constitution of India. So, despite these difficulties, secularism has been accepted widely as the national policy in our country. Majority of the political parties and even some of the Hindu organizations, Muslim organizations too, which are often accused of being communal in orientations, profess to be secular in outlook. And here I like to place Donald Smith's great statement. He says, it is meaningful to speak of India as a secular state, despite the existence of the problems. India is a secular state in the same sense in which one can say that India is a democracy, given the fact that the democracy, the meaning of democracy, I believe, is useless if it is bereft of the civic culture. So despite various undemocratic features of Indian politics and government, parliamentary democracy is functioning and with considerable vigor. Similarly, the secular state, the ideal is clearly embodied in the constitution, and it is being implemented in substantial measure. So here the focus should be there of this great scholar Donald Smith's statement when he speaks that India is secular in the same way, in which Indian state is secular in the same way, which one can say that India is a democracy. So this speaks of the fact that our democracy is pregnant with a lot of fallacies, a lot of structural inconsistencies. Now, the ambivalence which we find in the political system on the issue of secularism is also evident in the functioning of democratic polity. The contemporary democratic tradition in India is natural outgrowth of political reforms introduced by the British from time to time. And I'd like to take you back to the period of Britishers. Its major landmarks, as mentioned by Norman Palmer, one of the great scholars, are number one, the Indian Council Act of 1861, Lord Ripon's resolution on local self-government of 1882, the Indian Councils Act 1893, Morlow-Minto reforms of 1909, the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1918, the Government of India Act of 1919, and the Government of India Act of 1935. But surprisingly, the Government of India Act 1935, the last act, was never enforced, but has substantially influenced the federal nature of the parliamentary system as adopted through the Constitution. Despite this linkage with the British heritage, democracy in India cannot be said to be patterned entirely on any foreign model. This obtains both in the case of formal pattern and the process of democratic functioning. So the Indian Constitution recognizes the diversity in the Indian tradition through its emphasis on federalism and decentralization. It has an imprint of the Gandhian philosophy in its recognition of the need for many things. For instance, our religiosity, not early, that you must believe in certain forms of what we call the super Godhead. And to a great extent, its emphasis was on welfare state. That welfare state embodies the central values of humanism and tolerance preached by Gandhi. And of late, the functioning of democracy in our country, I believe within the 2-3 years, has further vindicated the extent to which it is rooted into the basic textures of traditional particular values represented by caste, kinship, religion, and other parochial identities, particularly the religious parameters, and the pressure groups based on universalistic identities of political and economic interests, as operated in the Western democracy, are replaced in India by religious groups, by caste groups, and so on and so forth, which have quasi-universalistic, if not fully particularistic attitudes. This is the nature of democracy that we have been surviving in. From a sociological point of view, these manifestations are not necessarily symptomatic of malfunctioning of democracy in India, but because of certain persons responsible for this state, I hold them directly, not to name any of them, maybe because of certain kinds of lack of understanding of Indian culture and tradition. In fact, these are natural manifestation of the stuff of which Indian democracy is made. It is a gradual replacement by more advanced and universalistic group identities, would take place only through an advancement and change in the Indian society, Indian people, Indian leadership. This gradual change will further contribute to the Indianization of politics and democracy in our country, It will answer back to the problems that created by the ideas of secularism and communalism in our country. Now, historically, social structure and tradition in India remained impervious to major elements of modernization or modernity until the contact with the West began, particularly the British began through colonizations. The encounters with Islam only reinforced the tradition because Islam, despite being exogenous to the Hindu tradition, was basically organized on the value themes, which were traditional. Ideally, Islam had no place for hierarchical differentiation of individuals seen through Qurans within its community of believers. Its worldview was messianic, historical, in contrast with Hindu view of continuity in this temporal world and the temporal world. The principle of transcendence in Islam was strictly monotheistic, and here too, if it differed from Hinduism. So the principle of holism, which no doubt was present both in Islam and Hinduism, also varied in sociological meaning in two civilizations. In Hinduism, holism implied individual social and moral subordination to the group without theocratic implications. But in Islam, the theocratic implication, theocratic element is a basic in Islam. So despite these dissimilarities in ideal value theme of Indian Hindu and Islamic tradition, there took place a synthesis between which reinforced the traditional character of Indian society without significant breakdown in its organization. Islam, in its Persian transformation, had already imbibed some elements of hierarchical stratification when it came to India from there, and in the midst of caste stratified Hindu society more so, owing to larger scale convergence during Muslim period of time to Islam by caste Hindus, lower caste Hindus. Islamic social structure in this country soon developed its own pattern of caste hierarchy. And if you go for the analysis of the communal acts in our country, this is what I'm not telling anything from scratch. This is on the basis of my field work. The data I could manage to gather both from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. The area that I come from, that is Champaran, this is also prone to, particularly Betia, West Champaran, prone, once upon a time, is prone to communal rats, Sitamarhi, and the data are connected even from Meerut and many more places of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. So on that basis, let me speak out एक चीज किसी ने कहा कि हिंदी में बात करिए, तो मैं बता रहा हूँ आपसे कि जब
डॉक्टर साहब अजीत भाई 10 मिनट और ले ले तो अच्छा रहेगा. 10 more minutes.
1-2 मिनट और
बता दीजिए जरा हिंदी में,
10 मिनट.
हाँ ठीक है. तो मैं इनको नहीं मैं इनके सवाल का जवाब दे रहा हूँ. उन्होंने कहा कि हिंदी में बात करिए, तो
पूछ लीजिए. चाहे तो आप मैथिली में भी बोल सकते हैं, भोजपुरी में बोल सकते हैं, अवधी में बोल सकते हैं.
अभी हिंदी में बोल रहा हूँ क्योंकि ये डेटा हमको बता रही है कि जो कम्युनल राइट्स हैं, उस कम्युनल राइट्स में आई एम सॉरी, आई बेग योर अपॉलजी, माय फ्रैंक्स आर आउट, but my franks are not from scratch. This is on the basis of my fieldwork experiences and data that I have with me at the moment. Recent data है मेरे पास, जिसमें वो बता रहे हैं कि जो भी कॉमनल एक्ट्स है उसमें हायर हिंदूज और ओरिजिनल मुस्लिम, जिसको अशरफ्स बोलते हैं, शेख, सैयद, पठान्स एंड मुगल्स, ये कभी पार्टिसिपेट नहीं करते कॉमनल एक्ट्स में. हायर हिंदूज मतलब हायर कास्ट की बात मैं कर रहा हूँ.
कम्युनल का मतलब क्या है?
कम्युनल का मतलब हुआ, यहाँ पर्टिकुलरली आई एम कन्फाइनिंग माय कम्युनल हिंदू मुस्लिम कम्युनिटीज के बीच में जो अपनी उनकी जो अपनी फीलिंग है, जो अपनी उनकी आइडियाज है, और हम इसको बोलते हैं अपने लैंग्वेज में, सोशियोलॉजिकल लैंग्वेज में, एथनोसेंट्रिक न्यूरोटिसिज्म. That I am a Muslim and I must have my say in the community that I belong to or in the area that I'm surviving in. तो ये this what जो न्यूरोटिक एथनोसेंट्रिज्म की बात कर रहे हैं हम तो एथनोसेंट्रिक है बहुत अच्छा आई एम हिंदू दैट्स ब्यूटीफुल नो प्रॉब्लम आई एम मुस्लिम देयर इज नो प्रॉब्लम बट व्हेन आई स्पीक दैट आई एम द बेस्ट इन द वर्ल्ड और आई एम सुपीरियर टू and I have my own, I must have my own right. This is already grabbed. This is psychology that I have in my mind, that my right has been grabbed. Then certainly this change into the conflict, the crisis and rats are taking place. So मैं डेटा ये बता रहा हूँ आपसे कि डेटा में हिंदू मुस्लिम जो भी रैट हुए हैं उसमें हायर कास्ट के हिंदू पार्टिसिपेट रेयरली करते और हायर जो ओरिजिनल मुस्लिम से जो अरबियन पार्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड से आए हैं जो सिख सैयद पठान सैन मुगल सभी भी यहाँ रह रहे हिंदुस्तान में वो भी पार्टिसिपेट नहीं करते ये लोअर हिंदूज जो कन्वर्ट हुआ है जिनको ना हिंदुइज्म से ना बुद्धिज्म से जैनिज्म से कहीं भी कोई राहत नहीं मिल पाई है उनको हायरार्की के तहत उनका एक्सप्लॉयटेशन होता रहा जब इस्लाम आई है उनके खलीफास कालिफ्स जब उनकी प्रचार करने लगे इस्लाम का कि जहाँ कोई हायरार्किकल स्ट्रक्चर्स नहीं है हायरार्की नाम की कोई चीज़ नहीं है तो दैट इम्प्रेस्ड द लोअर कास्ट हिंदूज एंड लोअर कास्ट हिंदूज कन्वर्टेड देमसेल्व्स तो उनका कन्वर्जन हुआ है और उस कन्वर्जन से वो थोड़े दिन के बाद दे स्टार्टेड ट्रीटिंग देमसेल्फ इक्वल टू द पीपल हु आर फ्रॉम ओरिजिनली अरबियन पार्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड दे वर द ओरिजिनल मुस्लिम्स और वहाँ मैट्रिमोनियल रिलेशनशिप के लिए वहाँ जब जाते हैं अपने बच्चों का तो दे वर माल ट्रीटेड एंड दैट इज द हिस्टोरिकल पीरियड दिस इज द मोमेंट इन द हिस्ट्री जो उनके दिमाग में एक न्यूरोटिसिज्म भरता है उनके दिमाग में एक खिलाफत भरती है नॉट खिलाफत अगेंस्ट द ओरिजिनल मुस्लिम्स बट खिलाफत अगेंस्ट द हिंदू रिलीजन It is because of the Hindu religion, religious system हमारी ये दुर्दशा है और still this continues. तो मैं नहीं समझता हूँ कि साहब ये कॉमनल रैट्स का जो भी कारण हो कोई चढ़ाता हो वो पॉलिटिकल रीजन्स हो सकता है लोग हमारे लीडर्स इसका एक्सप्लॉयटेशन करते हैं they pander to the prejudice of the Muslims, the minorities in our country for the vote banks. And they make a lot of palliatives, they announce a lot of palliatives for these minorities so that they must fall prey to their exploitations and finally they vote for the certain parties, certain kinds of ideology, so on and so forth. So I was talking about कि हमारे जो मॉडर्निटी में जो इस्लाम आ रही है इस्लाम के साथ के पास कोई भी theoretically no place for hierarchical differentiation of individuals के लिए उनके कम्युनिटी में कोई प्लेस ही नहीं है उनके प्रिंसिपल ऑफ ट्रांसेंडेंस इन इस्लाम भी मोनोथेइस्टिक मैंने कहा यहाँ से भी वो हिंदुइज्म से डिफर करते हैं और जो प्रिंसिपल ऑफ होलिज्म है वाज इस्लाम में भी है हिंदुइज्म भी है लेकिन दोनों सोशियोलॉजिकल इनकी मीनिंग डिफरेंट है दोनों सिविलाइजेशन में इसकी मीनिंग डिफरेंट है हिंदुइज्म में होलिज्म का मतलब होता है इंडिविजुअल सोशल एंड मॉरल सबऑर्डिनेशन टू द ग्रुप विदाउट थ्योरेटिक इम्प्लीकेशंस लेकिन इस्लाम में थ्योरेटिक इम्प्लीकेशंस होते हैं थियोक्रेटिक इम्प्लीकेशंस होते हैं तो मैं ये बता रहा था कि इतना डिसिमिलैरिटी है दोनों के बीच में इन आइडियल वैल्यू थीम ऑफ हिंदू एंड इस्लामिक ट्रेडिशन में फिर भी एक सिंथेसिस होती है between which reinforce the traditional character of Indian society without significant breakdown in its organization. Islam अपने Persian transformation में had already imbibed some elements of hierarchical stratification जब वो ये होता है यहाँ पर convergence होती है तो in the midst of caste stratified Hindu society में owing to the large scale conversion की बात मैंने किया by caste Hindus, Islamic social structure इस तरह से इस हमारे समाज में हमारे देश में soon develop its own pattern of caste hierarchy और ये जो इंडियन ट्रेडिशन है इसके खिलाफ ये सारे बातें जाती हैं। हमारी जो ट्रेडिशन है, हमारी जो वैल्यू थीम है ओरिजिनली, जो आई एम नॉट टॉकिंग ऑफ द हिंदू वैल्यू थीम, हम डिफाइन करते हैं अपनी ट्रेडिशन को वैल्यू थीम्स के, जो कि दिस इज फाउंड टू बी इंटरलॉक्ड इनटू certain ideas, certain concepts, and these are the principles of hierarchy, holism, continuity, and transcendence. And these are also interlocked with other elements of Indian social structure. It's a very typical hierarchy. Hierarchy was ingrained not only in the system of caste and subcaste stratification, but also Hindu concepts of human nature. Occupational life, साइकिस में जिसको आश्रम की बात करते हैं, moral duties में से धर्म की बात करते हैं. Holism जो हमारी ट्रेडिशन में है, that means a relationship between individual and group. जिसमें group was encompassed by the latter, that is by individuals in respect of duties and rights. So group has the precedence over the individuals. And what had precedence here was community or Sangh, and not the individual. So this subsumption of individual by collectivity persisted all along the line of traditional social structure. That is the family, village, community, caste, and political territory, and nation, whatever. So communalism in traditional social system was reinforced through the value system of continuity, which in Hinduism was symbolized by principles of karma. So if you talk of communalism in our traditional social system, this I say that this may be seen through the value system of continuity, which in Hinduism was symbolized by principles of karma, transmigration of soul, and a cyclical view of change. So the principle of transcendence also posited that legitimation of traditional values could never be challenged on grounds of rationality. So this rationality derived from the non-sacred or profane skills of evaluation, particularly drawn from Western experiences. So it formed a super concept contributing to integration as well as rationalization of the other value themes of our tradition. This is what we mean by the traditions. So of late, a lot of examples, a lot of encounters that we have had. And from this, we can speak of that our tradition is at stake, given the fact it is much more resilient, it has tremendous capacity to absorb everything, and ultimately secularism, what Gandhi is talking about, exactly in Gandhian framework, will have a trump over that, will win over it, and it will continue for perhaps a period which you call the temporal period. As long as the humanity survives on this earth of India, तब तक ये secularism Gandhian framework में हमेशा रहेगा और हमेशा जीता रहेगा, given the fact it will confront a lot of crises, the crises that we have been confronting in terms of communalism, not exactly what our tradition defines. Communalism का जो tradition अभी मैंने आपको माने बताया, उस तरह का communalism नहीं है. Communalism, as a matter of fact, here is pregnant with animosity, not the competitions. Animosity, the conflicts, and the conflicts basing on nothing, but basing on neurotic ethnocentrism. Thank you very much, sir. And now, once again, I express my thanks to the chairperson, Anand Kumarji, and Professor Gautam Saab, who asked me to share this dais and interact with the audiences, the enlightened and the scholars from various parts of the world. Thank you very much. Now I invite any question if you have.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir, for your excellent deliberation, I would say. And you touched almost all important aspects of discussing this idea of Indian traditions and religion and the making of a state. You know, these are the two very important ideas which we have to face. And you almost the concluding remark you brought, Gandhi and his idea of dharma and peace. So actually that is a very important idea which has a kind of path of solution of all existing problem of violence and communism. So may I like to invite, we are also joined by many of our participants. So Rajiv Gupta, yes, please.
Yes. One question can be raised. I am sorry, Professor Pandey, I could not join this program in time because I was out of Jaipur. We all know this fact that now ours is a post-truth society where alternative facts have been generated and the politics of identity is in fact controlling and directing the entire political frame of reference or entire political system. Now, Gandhi was searching the truth and he was making this statement that without anger, without selfishness, and without hate, truth cannot be searched. Now, and this kind of politics in a post-truth society comprises anger, selfishness, and hate. Now, with this perspective, I would like to understand how the value of secularism can be created or can be included as one of the important components of the personalities of Indian citizen, where anti-secular environment has become a fact of life, and all important political functionaries along with bureaucracy, they are in fact imitating all these dimensions by using several kind of false narratives.
Thank you very much. That's a beautiful question, but the question may be answered if we focus on the encounter between two traditional systems. So I take you back to the Islamizations in our country, because when we talk of the communalism, perhaps we refer to the two major communities, Hindus and Muslims in our country. For any kind of change, the Islamic influence on India was much more limited if you go into the history, and not conducive to particularly the modernization process. However, if you look into its diffusion, gave birth to the emergence of many varieties of traditions, although it is not clear to what extent Islam led to the innovations in the micro and macro social structures of Indian society. Its impact on family, caste, village community was very significant. And particularly in the macro structures, it did not set out any basically new forms. So Islamic polity and judicial administration were essentially feudal and primordial that period of time. So the legal principles and norms were also hierarchical and did not fully recognize the principles of equality and equity in political and civil rights, what Quran has been advocating for. This explains why Islamic impact, unlike that of the West, failed to contribute to the promotion of the secular ideas in our country. This confrontation will continue because of the backdrop that I have presented before you. So now the cultural changes, the kind of changes which the impact of Islam initiated, emerged from the growth of Islamic tradition on Indian soil. And since Islam established itself in India by conquest, some element of force in the spirit of this tradition cannot be ruled out, but a more important reason for its growth can be attributed to structural factors, which in early Hindu tradition motivated castes towards Sanskritization. This is what Eminent has been also talking about. it is revealing that both Sanskritization and conversion to Islam or Islamization have been most popular among the lower castes of our country. It's what I have referred in course of my discussions. Perhaps you have missed it. So the structural prerequisites for Islamization to a redefinition of self-image, frustration from the closure of existing system of stratification, and anticipation that conversions would improve social chances. So the same factors were active also in Sanskritization. So the important difference, however, was in the reaction of the Hindus to such changes, which presumably was of definite hostility and isolation. So Islamization at every stage might have meant an active and hostile reaction from the original membership group towards the converts and their complete exclusion from its membership. This was not the case in Sanskrit. This peculiarity of process of Islamization is reason enough for the reinforcement or this durability of communalism or the feeling of communalism in our country. And it's what I'm talking about, neurotic ethnocentrism. As long as it continues, it's very tough, perhaps impossible to do away with, to efface this kind of blot from the Indian polity. And unfortunately, Indian politicians, the leadership in our country today, not to name anybody else, is perhaps either maybe because of their self-interest, they are most of the time, day in and day out, trying to pander to the prejudice of this kind of limitations in among the Muslims and Hindus, and that too only for the vote banks. And these masses, mostly the illiterate masses or less literate, fall prey to this kind of, the strategy of the politicians in our country. The leadership, I don't like to involve myself any kind of the criticism or the reactions from other groups. This is what I'm talking to you sociologically. And perhaps you are a sociologist, you must extract the meaning that I'm trying to communicate in response as a reply to your questions. Thank you very much for your questions, sir.
Thank you. And I request Professor Pandey to kindly note down this question so that we can have some save of timing also. So I invite Meera Chakravarti and then Professor Gyan Guluri and then Professor Jagdish Joker, who is also joined, and then Janna Singh Anand. And dear and respected participant, if you have any question, please write down in the chat also. Professor Meera Chakravarti, over to you.
Thank you, Ranveer. Thank you, Professor Pandey. The complexity that you describe, of course, is very challenging. But what I want to know is that has this content of the secular practices entered process of consciousness when the leadership, which you just now said, in the political parties could be said to become a defining factor? And if that is not so, more and more people get alienated. And how many, the vote bank politics have always been there, but how do we reconcile with this fact that this practice of this leadership is constantly alienating people? So, would you try to explain why this marginalization, this not taking step of reconciliation, how this can be, challenges can be confronted? Thank you. Thank you, Ranveer.
I've already explained in most of my discussions with you that people fall prey to because of their self-interest. And politicians create a situation. This is what I'm talking about, the pandering to the prejudice of the people, that I must have the certain status, my identification must change. I must come nearer to the power politics. I must have a comfortable life. These are certain kinds of ideas. They like to get them realized. And for that, they fall prey to, and politicians with their own strategy very cunningly come out with and fairly pander to their prejudice in terms of the satisfaction of their needs, their desires to have certain respectable space. Because for these people, which I call illiterate or less literate people, talking to a politician, talking to the prime minister of the country, talking to a minister or MLA is a big thing. And politician asks him to sit for 5 to 10 minutes. They feel much more exalted. So this is how there is no other region. The other region, you can speak of the kind of explanations that I have met, how Islamization as a cultural process has completed a full cycle in our country. And because of fulfillment of the full cycle in our country, this communal feeling has run its tent, and it will continue as long as Gandhian philosophy is not being invited to respond to the kind of crisis that we confront today in terms of the crisis, in terms of communal rights, or the feeling of communalism. That question is a beautiful question, but for that we have to have another session for answering to your questions. Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Professor Gyan?
Yes, thank you very much. It was really very impressive, and I could learn very much. I would like perhaps to ask or to make a short remarks about what I think it is the root of communalism. Since this root, as regards the British politics, is a common way of acting of British dominance all over the countries where Great Britain had dominance, that is that of fundamentally dividing the different groups of the dominated country. That is, the best way in order to dominate a country was, in the British tradition of politics, to divide the groups and to make the groups against each other. And I have the impression that at least some points of the morally Minto reforms, which have an influence on the formation of communalism, are in this logic. That is, well, apparently they are made in order to involve the Indian population in the politics, but actually they have had as a aim also that of dividing the Indian population in different groups, which then have contrast with each other. That is, I speak of the British politics, not, of course, of other questions. And I think that, unfortunately, the drawbacks of this politics, of the British politics, is then to see in many countries in which British politics had an influence. That is, even after the British politics is not more the dominant power in a country, the drawbacks, the failures, and the problems which are connected to this dividing of groups are perseverating in the country. That is, I think that as regards the particular case of India, the morally Minto reforms are a good example in order to see how British politics apparently wanted to make reforms towards and to the advantage of the population, in this case, the Indian population, but actually aimed to enforce a power and to perseverate the power of the colonialism, of the colonial politics of Great Britain on India. That is, I have this impression, and I think it is something which is common to the strategy of the British politics. Perhaps also now, if one analyzes something about the British politics, the foreign British politics. So this is my question, whether we can give these. I tend to give a negative, very negative judgment, consideration of a morally Minto reforms, but perhaps I'm mistaken.
I'd like to take up your questions, but in slightly different way. If we look into the establishment of British power, with the establishment of the British power, gradually the relations between Hindu and Muslim groups within a period of time, and traditions began to be politicized. As, this was sparked off by many factors, such as the emergence of Hindu revivalist movements. For instance, Arya Samaj professed to reconvert Muslims to Hindu faith at that period of time. Frustration of Muslims with the British, and the beginning of new political movement for national independence, which stimulated Muslims to chalk out their own course of action. And the result of this politicization was finally the division of India, adding a new dimension to the minority nature of Indian Muslims. So this is slightly different. If you adopt the British nature of politics or strategy, this will not be in consonance with what we are talking about, the secular ideals or secular values. There has now emerged a new awakening among the Muslims. If you to level off the differences of their traditions and of caste subcultures of the past, by encouraging purist conformity with our traditions with the tradition of India, Islam. There are a lot of movements, for instance, which are directly oriented to this goal. And Muslim communalism has also become active and forceful in some parts of northern India, and particularly in southern Kerala. The process of particular mobility to new caste status by Islamization is now being replaced by emphasis upon horizontal solidarity of the entire Muslim community. Lest the country becomes divided, if we adopt the British strategy, we agree with some of your points, but not in a fashion the Britishers have employed their strategy. Some of the points are very significant. I do agree with you. But this fact, during the British period that I have just narrated, we must also take cognizance of this. Very important. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Vijay Rao Sahab, please share your thought. Ji. You are muted.
I am a little confused as to what is it that makes people react so viciously against another. It might be a very naive question. I'm not a sociology. I'm not into this, but just as a common citizen, I'm wondering how a government has been able to change and create such tense feelings against another community in such a short period of time. Or what is it always dominant, and it's just that people have played around with it?
Yes. Thank you. Miniti Pradhanji, please. You are muted. Please unmute yourself. Ask your question.
Hello. Now I am audible. I believe
Yes.
I am audible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Randir, for giving me the opportunity to. I was just listening. So many things, many confusions are there for me. I need to read it a little more again. But then no, I would like to know a little more about the politics of identity, whether it has helped us to continue our Indian tradition, whether we have receded from it, how it is. So I would like to know a little more about the politics of identity. Thank you.
Yes, and one more question from my side also. Professor Ajit, Ashish Nandi study reveals very different perspective. He says that in urban areas, people are more prone to communal rights, and he presented also the data. And Professor Pandey, you are saying that people who are less educated and so means how do you means see because he has also the data which says that there are more communal violence rights in cities rather than urban areas. So how do you respond that?
I never said that. I never made any differentiation between the rural and urban areas. I said the lower caste, the poor lower caste,
Okay, yes,
higher
yes.
caste.
So
So I do agree with the man's study. But the question that had been asked by Professor Rao is that that can be answered when we focus on Islamization. Just now I have spoken to you that it is a process, cultural process, and now it has completed a full cycle in our country. If you look into that, this is what I have also referred to. It began as a process of external impact and conversion of low caste Hindus to Muslim great traditions. Somebody asked me about the identifications. The answer may be had from this explanation that I'm speaking to you. Then it emerged as a process of status mobility within the Islamic social structure, very much like Sanskritization. And finally, it regained its earlier orthodoxy after the conversion. Subcultural fields which are outside the tradition of Islam are purposely renounced with the view that Muslims must consolidate themselves into an organic whole, irrespective of divergent traditions of language, of caste, subcaste, and region, etc. This turn in the process of Islamization corresponds with the new movement among the lower Hindu castes to form caste association and establish horizontal solidarity instead of seeking a status mobility within the caste system through Sanskritization. So the causal background for both appears to be structurally identical. It emanates from the realization that in a democratic society like ours, power and status mobility would more easily be gained by consolidation of one's rank and formation of effective power and protest groups rather than by imitating a traditionally defined higher status, which is difficult to get and is also becoming rapidly obsolescent in the new social dynamics. We can also say that latent reasons for such changes, both in the Hindu and Islamic culture traditions, are disguised protest movements against the established system of stratification and power. And the attempt is not only towards forming horizontal communal solidarities, but also to give them organizational shape of modern corporate groups based on rational norms, allocation of duties and obligations, rational means of communications and propaganda, etc. So this aspect of the movements to me, which may apparently seem to be traditionalizing, is highly relevant to our analysis of this secular ideas or the communal feelings in our country. And this has perhaps prompted me to come out with the title of my today's communication, that is the communal society. This society, as a matter, it appears, is pregnant with these kinds of limitations, structural crisis, structural inconsistencies. As long as it continues, it's a difficult state to respond to them wholly. And for that, the best strategy and perspective to contain it is Gandhian strategy, Gandhian ideals, love for humanity. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And really, it was very interactive session, I would say. Yes, Meera ji, yes, please.
सॉरी थोड़ा क्लैरिफिकेशन चाहिए पांडे जी प्रोफेसर पांडे जी आपके उत्तर से मुझे बड़ा दुख हुआ
Yeah.
इसलिए कि the thing is that since democracy is where you have to negotiate and renegotiate all the time. So there has to be आप हाथ उठा के ये नहीं कह सकते कि ठीक है इन लोगों को वोट बैंक से है so इसमें तो जाने दो. No, we have been, in the women's movement, we have been calling these leaders on the table and saying that, okay, this much reservation is needed, the 33% reservation, which we wanted 33.5%, which actually
Yes.
Parliament has not yet passed. I mean, but we are still negotiating. मेरी जो article है paper में वो 20 साल पहले जो था वो अभी भी है. But I am not hopeless. I will do that. So मैं ये कह रही हूँ कि this renegotiation must carry on. You must talk both at the epistemic level, at the academic level, at the movement level, at the ordinary level. So you have to meet these challenges. मैंने आपको पूछा था कि challenges कैसे करेंगे? So let us not resign to their vote politics. We'll have to confront.
Actually, madam, I'm not resigning to that. I'm telling you the society today is much more weaker. I beg your pardon for this kind of adjectives for the society that we live in. Weaker in the sense, the majority. Majority, I couldn't understand the dynamics of the voting to certain political party or certain individuals, given the fact that the individuals who are contesting the elections, they are not up to the standard, yet the people vote for. And why they are voting for these kinds of people. And I am reminded of one of the greatest philosophers' statement, Max Weber's, that the politics is a vocation. Those who are well-read people, academically very sound, and have the capacity of understanding and comprehending, those who have the love for humanity, thirst for the knowledge, have the right to go into the politics. They must go. He exhorted the people of such kind of people to come to the politics. As long as we as society come forward, like you, individual like you, so well-read man, so beautiful writer, prolific writer, unless you come forward for that, you say, no, kahan election ladna hai, kyun ladna hai, gundo ke raj mein kahan ladna hai. It's difficult. Like, for instance, Professor Anand Kumar must have the seat long back. He must be nominated as Rajya Sabha member. He has all attributes of a great politician. Understanding not on the basis of manipulation, because on the basis of his understanding and the comprehension of Indian ethos and the kind of tradition that we have been surviving for a longer period of time. So this is what actually I'm not, the surrendering to these kinds of manipulations, but my reactions are embedded into the kind of things that I have spoken. I brought back home certain real situations that I confront. I confronted and I thought I must share these real experiences of mine with all of you. And this is a sad state. I never wanted to name anybody as, neither to refer to any of the current or the past leadership. But at times I come under duress to refer to that. The contemporary or the present leadership is not competent enough, and thereby the state is also not competent enough to contain the crisis that we confront, whether it is the communalism or any other issue of for the benefit or for the welfare of the Indian citizens. Otherwise, perhaps you have misunderstood me, and I'm sorry if I have not rightly communicated to you for that. But I do agree with the kind of thing that you have communicated. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
No, I didn't misunderstand. I said, let's fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of Gandhian School of Democracy and Socialism, I really appreciate Professor Ajit Pandey's insightful deliberations. And all of us, I'm very happy that we made a very interactive session. Yeah, and we are very happy that Professor Gyan Gului, Professor Meera Chakravarti, Miniti Pradhan ji, Rajiv Gupta ji. We are very happy that Professor Ashish Nandi, who has also joined for some time, And so I can see many friends, Kedarnath Sarma ji, Vijay Rao Sahab, so Rajiv Gupta ji. So we look forward for your kind engagement, participation, and thank you so much for making this event very successful. Thank you so much.
Very much, sir. Professor Anand Kumar जी को मैं प्रणाम करता हूँ।
बहुत धन्यवाद आपको, बहुत धन्यवाद।
और आपको भी रणधीर जी, आपको भी नमस्कार मेरी तरफ से, सबको प्रणाम मैं करता हूँ। थैंक यू वेरी मच। थैंक यू।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।